manager at our last juried show. I think it was down in Glenwood last year. She's a very accomplished pastelist, member of the Pastel Society of America and master circle of the IAPS. So I think we're really going to enjoy her perspective on sharing information about how she goes about pastel. She also has a book published called Finding Your Style in Pastel. So some real interesting perspectives that I've never seen. So I'm looking forward to see what she has to share. So there you go.
Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll start back up.
All right. Well, Helen called me 2 weeks ago today, I think, and asked me if I could do a presentation. And I thought about it and I realized it was pretty good timing because I've been kind of going through a certain amount of angst lately as to who I am as an artist. You'd think after all these years I would have figured it out, but anyway. So thanks to Helen and the board.
Drink plenty of water.
What did you say, Helen?
Oh.
Anyway.
Drink plenty of water. Sorry, I didn't mute myself.
Okay, so over the past 2 years, I've worked on a variety of styles. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each of these. And when I get through that, which will include a little bit of either a little bit or a longer PowerPoint demo, then I'm going to stop and ask you what you think about it. Now, if there are questions you have as I'm going along, you want me to stop or go back, just put it in chat and Helen will moderate this and help me on this. Okay. So,
Jean, do you want me to interrupt you or
if you think it's important or if you think it can wait till okay. I'll let you figure that out.
Okay.
Okay. So I kind of thought, well, having to put together a PowerPoint and actually organize my thoughts on all this would be really good. So let's hope that I figured out something. All right. So since there's a whole lot, and I wanted to also thank, I wanted to welcome a number of my new students who I think are here, my longer time students, and Dave Lawton's students if they are there as well. This is just great. Dave's an old friend of mine. But a lot of you don't really know me. So who have I been? I want to give you a brief introduction. I have now, exactly as of this year, been working in pastel exclusively for the past 30 years. I am primarily a painter of the landscape and particularly buildings in the landscape. That has always been my real love. I'm known as a colorist. I even got the title, The Architect of Color, from an article in the Pastel Journal back in 2011. I'm also an avid teacher, and as Denise mentioned, I wrote the book Finding Your Style in Pastel, which I just republished, and it's a lot cheaper than it used to be. My work is fairly detailed, and I primarily worked from life, 14 years on plein air, and photos, more about photos. For me, the surface is what has a big impact on my painting. So I'm going to just show you a few of my past greatest hits as they apply to the surfaces I used. So for quite a while, I created my own surfaces. Like many pastelists, I began painting on Wallace and color fixed papers. Wallace is now no longer available, but those were both sanded papers. Color fix is still around. Then after a workshop with Susan Ogilvie, I began creating my own surfaces using Gator board and Art Spectrum liquid primer, which I put on with a brush. And the resulting surfaces retained the brush strokes and helped me create more dynamic paintings. And I really liked doing this. But over time, a lot of my best paintings were created on the surface. Over time, I found that they were very hard surfaces. There was no give to them. So I switched to Reeves BFK Reeves 400-pound printmaking paper, which was available at the time. And I love this. It had a softer, more textured surface. Couldn't get hard edges on it, but here are some paintings created from 2010 to 2013. So this is Yellow House in Winter, painted in 2010. And this is a typical painting on gator foam. You can see the effect. I think you can see, if you look at this, you can see the texture in here. And the texture of this surface is what allowed me to do all of this color on color. It was really great. It's not as great for the sky, but for this kind of layering of color, I really loved using this surface. That was the gator foam. This is the Reeves paper. And I still own both of these paintings. They're in my apartment. This is Colorado Morning. This is a later painting done on the Reeves. You can see the effect here. You can see how much softer it is, the softness of the surface, but it is hard to get really straight edges. I kind of managed to do it, but I tried to put this on my business card, and the guy said, I don't think you want to do that. It was just too blurry. So those are the two major surfaces and styles that I had for quite a while. Then later on, I got into using UART 320 and realized this was a wonderful surface. It has a lot of tooth. It had just the right amount of grit to it. But I always got it mounted because it curls and buckles. So I created a whole series of paintings of Washington, D.C. and lots of other pictures on this surface. So these, if any of you saw my show at Strathmore last year, this was the majority of those paintings were done on UART 320. So here is Back Alley Blues from 2018. Buildings in the landscape, as you can see. But it was really, I love this surface for layering. You can see the layering of color on here. And when I was working on this painting, a guy came into my studio, and I had my public studio, and asked me if I was a member of the trash can school, which I thought was rather clever. Okay, and here is Lock and Snow from 2020. Again, this is a very, lot of layering of color here, but very smooth surface. This is not the highly textured surfaces. I would have had a hard time doing a painting like this on the gator foam because this required a lot of smoothness. Okay. Then I got into working on the dark UART. I decided to try that out. One of my friends who came to the studio and painted with me really liked that, and I thought that might be fun to play with. So I tried that out, and I did Cactus Garden and Rain Country. Some of you may have seen that at last spring's show. But when I'm working without an underpainting, which is my primary modus operandi, I like to begin by defining the dark shapes. And when you're working on dark, you can't do that. So I decided this was not my future, but here is Cactus Garden in Rain Country. One of the things I realized when I was working on these dark surfaces, it's just like working on a white surface, which I don't recommend, is that it's very hard to get your values right. And I realized that all the paintings on the dark surfaces were a little darker than they should have been. I think this one looks okay because there's so much brightness here, but others didn't turn out too well. So I kind of decided that if I'm going to use a tone surface, I'd like something more of a mid tone. Okay, I'm just going to say something about the use of photos, because that has a lot to do with what I've been working on the last 2 years. I think I'm pretty good at making necessary changes to photos, and I've worked a lot from black and white photos. That's always been a strength. But I'm a little sensitive to those who insist on always working from life. Given that I like to paint New England, it's kind of hard. So you'll see that my use or non-use of photos is key to what I've been struggling with. Okay, so exploring 3 different approaches. And so I've got 3 different things I've been thinking about working on. In May of 2022, I decided to work loosely and more intuitively on straight landscape using Reeves BFK. My goal was not to copy the photo and to be free with my colors. In some cases, I made up the paintings completely. I didn't use the photo at all. In others, there was a reference to begin with. So that's phase 1. Phase 2, in July of 2023, I decided to work more slowly and carefully on a toned surface using Lux Archival sanded paper, toned with colored inks, and using photographs as references. And also in 2023, I decided that I wanted to explore a style that combines careful detail with looser, more abstracted surroundings. So those are the 3 things I'm going to be talking about. And I have some PowerPoint demos to share with you. So the first one, this was the name of the show that I had. It was Intuiting the Landscape. So 2022, this was a very critical year for me. 2 years ago, we sold our house. I gave up my home studio and we moved to Fox Hill in Bethesda, which is where I am now sitting. I also developed sciatica. I couldn't stand for some weeks, and later I broke my painting arm. So it was not a great year, but somehow or other, I did a whole lot of work. In January and May, I lost representation in 2 of the 3 galleries I was in and decided I really needed to change my style. I felt that I was too detailed and tight and, all of that. So I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do that's different? So my plan was, I had a series of photos taken of Rehoboth Bay in Delaware. None was perfect, so I wasn't tempted to copy them, but they had dramatic lighting, grasses, low bushes, things I could play with. So I began with drawings. And I did the drawings when I had the sciatica and I couldn't stand. I decided to work in 2 formats I haven't used a lot, squares and oblongs. And so I decided to stick to those 2 shapes and sizes. From the drawings, I did small color studies using Lux Archival sanded paper. After that, I did the larger paintings, playing with composition and color, making it up as I went along. Okay, so note that these are all done on Reeves, but not the 400-pound. It's no longer available. You can't get it anymore, which is really sad. What Dakota sells is 280. And it's just not as good as the 400. The lighter weight buckled, and then I got it mounted, and then the surface was really hard. It was mounted on gator foam. So none of it had the total enjoyment of that original 400-pound Reeves that I used to use. So here's one of the reference photos that I started out working with. And as you can see, this is Rehoboth Bay. There is some water back there, which I expanded on. It had been raining and the clouds were quite dramatic. And so I thought, well, this is really great. I can play with something like this. And obviously I could improve on the color. So here is an 18 by 18 square shape of this is the piece of the Reeves, whatever it was. It's toned with, I'm using golden pastel ground, okay, with grit in it, and I tone it with liquid acrylic. So I toned it with this orange color and put it on with a brush. And I put 2 layers on there, and you can see the brush strokes here. You can see that, okay? You can see it going right through these clouds. So the texture is fun, but I have to say the texture is better for this part than it is for this part. Trying to do sky and clouds with all this texture is not all that easy. And I wasn't too sure I was happy with this, but one of the main things about this whole series was not starting out with a set composition, okay? So I couldn't do an underpainting, because if you're going to have, you can only do an underpainting if you know what your composition is. But if you're going to be free with the composition and play around with it, you have to just work on a toned surface. So this is why I'm working on a toned surface. And then here you can see I've started with putting in the darks. These are just happen to be pictures that I had on my cell phone. So this is not a full demo or anything, but I did find these in process slides. So here it is as it began. Here it is almost done. You can see I've played around with colors here. One of the things I had to realize, I had to figure out was a light source. And I said, okay, all right, the light is hitting here, up here in the sky. So the light has to be coming from this direction. So if I wanted to have a little path here. And so I tried to make this into a bush with cast shadow underneath. So I tried to put the light coming from the left. And here's the final painting with a little more yellow-green. And this was really fun. My friend Lindsay, who is in our audience today, was there with me. And we had a lot of fun, just sort of playing with, let's put some color here. Let's put some color there. I put turquoise in here. So it was great. Of course, I realized after I'd finished this one that I had cut it right down the middle, right in half, cut it right in half. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to do a lot of them. And, you know, maybe I'll throw this one out. No, this is the only one that's sold. Good thing I didn't. Okay, so that's that. Now here's, you know, for this series, I had to depend on what was on my cell phone. So you're going to see what I have. This is one of the 12 by 12 studies on the Lux Archival. And the studies turned out to be quite different from the actual finished paintings. They were done on sanded paper, so they're very different. You can see the difference in the sky. The sanded paper is much easier to do clouds in there. I like this one. I like these colors and all of this. I put some purple here. I really had fun doing this. When I got to the painting, you know, I didn't really like this color. This is more of a red-orange. But I played with shapes again. It was really all about shapes. Helen noted that this was an earlier photo of this where the horizon seems to be going down, but it actually is straight in the, this was photography. So this is a comparison of a study and a painting. Here is an underpainting. Boy, this is really awful. So I decided to do some hydrangeas. We had this wonderful bush out front here, and I was really inspired by that. They were white hydrangeas. So I started out, here's one of the oblong shapes, and I toned it. And then I decided, you know, it was going to be hard to get the dark with all that orange coming through. So I decided to do an underpainting, and this is hard pastel before alcohol. Here it is after alcohol. This is really awful. This is really terrible looking underpainting, but it actually did the job. So for this, I started out playing with little balls of color, really fun, you know, colors that I liked. It's kind of an off blue and kind of a brownish green. And, you know, I just played with this. This is more abstract than I've ever been in my life, you know. And then I got into the light. And here's the finished painting. This is the other one that sold. I sold 2 paintings. So it was one of my favorites. Here's the surface. You can really see the surface back here. I loved painting on this. This was fun. And I was very intuitive with the color. I realized after doing all these blues and greens, it needed something else. So I added pink to it, and that was great. So I really enjoyed doing this. Then I got even more experimental, and I didn't have a nice series of pictures that I wanted to work from. So I decided to make up paintings. And this is one that I made up after I was going to my studio up 7 Locks Road, and it was fall, and the colors of the trees were just beautiful. And so I just made up a painting. I made up a composition based on what I saw. I toned this one teal color ink. This was an ink. And I started with the tops of the trees, and I wasn't sure where I was going at all. This was a little tree that was outside the dining room here that I wanted to have in this picture. And it didn't work until I actually added the shape of the grass. I'm like, oh, now it works, because now these trees have a base to them. So, you know, this is all about shapes and color. So I was pleased that I could make up a painting, but I don't think it's a very good painting. It doesn't seem to meet my standards anyway. So I will be interested in what you guys think of it. Okay. All right. So 2023, I had two shows. I had the show at Strathmore, which began in late 2022, that ended in January. Then I had a show at Artists and Makers in Rockville. It poured for the opening. It was terrible. Only artists saw that show. Nobody else saw it. It was really a nice show, but only artists saw it. I just didn't sell a thing. And then my dear friend Mary Jo at Chesapeake Frame invited me to put up a number of the paintings there. And that's where I sold the two paintings. And she said that people loved the show. They really loved it. They would come in and they were really excited about it. But, you know, anyway, as an aside, in April of 2023, I gave up my studio in Rockville and moved my stuff to the art room in Fox Hill. So this was a really major change. I could no longer teach in person. Okay, I can paint downstairs, but I can't teach. I now teach only right where I am right now on Zoom. Okay, my paintings are all in a storage unit, and space is a major consideration for me. I'm now 75 years old. I quit work. At 55, decided I had another 30-year career ahead of me. I've been through 20 of the 30 years. So this is a lot of what's going on here, is the change in my life as well as my paintings. So here's what I liked and didn't like about this phase. So much of this period, it was rewarding to me because I felt like I was taking my 30 years of experience and I was able to come up with compositions and color and improve on things. So I was being more creative. To begin with, I loved going back to working on a handmade surface, but the surface wasn't what I had used originally. I got tired of the Reeves buckling. And then when Mary Jo mounted it for free on gator foam for me, but it was so hard. I just didn't like it. So, most importantly, though, I was never sure that these paintings were good. I really wasn't. They worked best when I had a series of photos, like that first series of Rehoboth Bay. But I didn't have a lot of that. So I kind of ran out of ideas to work from. If I do more, what I'm thinking about, I'm going to explore different substrates, such as illustration board, heavy cold press watercolor papers, something with some substance to it that will have some softness, but will not buckle. And I put in this slide, one of my favorite artists, pastel artist, is Stan Bloomfield. And he works with multiple layers of gel, multiple layers, washing off and putting it back on. But I've noticed, and he does rocks, and I like rocks, but he never has skies and clouds. He never has skies and clouds. And so if you don't have skies and clouds, this works great. It does not work for clouds. So I thought about it. I thought, well, I really got all these pictures of the rocks at Widewater down in the canal. I've always liked doing rocks. So maybe this is a way of continuing with the handmade surfaces and exploring that. So let's just stop a minute here. And Helen, how should we handle? I would like to have, let me see, do I have another slide? Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think of this phase of the paintings?
Yeah, there are no comments so far, but I see everyone rapidly following along. So this is a
Okay.
good chance, I would think, to, if you have a question, unmute yourself and ask it directly.
Just unmute and I'll answer.
Mm-hmm. But you have to unmute yourself.
I'd
I
like
have
to,
a question. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question, Jean. This is Kim. What do you, when you say you use inks for your under surface, are you talking about what kind of ink?
Yeah, I could actually show you a bottle. I have this De La Rowney is one of
Oh,
them. And I've forgotten what the other one is. They're little bottles. I get them at Plaza. They're colored inks. And I
and
started out with this, you'll see, a real red ink. And lately I've been buying something called bird's wing copper or something. But they're really pretty colors. And if you want to be free with your composition, and I never work directly on white. So if you want to be free with your composition, you can just use a toned surface. And I kind of enjoyed doing that.
and it dries fairly
Oh,
quickly.
it dries very quickly. Yeah.
This is an acrylic ink?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just get a bottle.
I'm thinking the kind of ink I'm thinking is the kind you would use in a pen to do colored pen and ink drawings, but I'm not sure.
I don't think so. Well, that's not the way it's certainly administered.
Or printmaker's ink.
Mm. Here she comes.
Here I am. So,
And you have a couple more questions.
yeah. Okay. So this is the De La Rowney.
Okay, I've seen that.
Okay. Yeah. And this is Liquitex, the other one. This is Liquitex. That was the real bright orangey color.
Okay.
And
So Joanne asked, why
yeah.
do you prefer the ink under surface? It's
Well,
like, why
keep
do you
in
like
mind,
it?
there's two different things here. One is when I put on, when I'm using, in this series, I was using a gel and putting it on paper, okay? And when I put that gel on, it's clear. And I never want to work on something clear unless I'm going to do an underpainting. So I tone the gel. Now I used to tone it with liquid acrylic, but I just got into inks as just a change from liquid acrylic, just so I have a toned surface. But now I'm using this also on Lux Archival. I can tone the Lux Archival as well with this, okay?
Let me read a couple of comments here and then we'll see if there are any more coming up. Mary Bay said, I find you're changing to square and oblong formats fascinating. I like that you choose to give yourself a new set of boundaries. It's really interesting. Here's a question from Patricia. What do you think about Pastel Premier papers? I didn't hear much about the 400 to 600 sanded papers. They come in lovely mid-tone neutrals.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to factor this one in, have you ever tried using Reeves for monoprint, using the monoprint as an underpainting? It's fun and helps me loosen up.
I've never done a monoprint. I used to do etching. I used to do lithographs before I got into pastel. I did stone lithographs and I put colored pencil on top of them. So I understand that, but I don't do monoprints. As far as surfaces, I know surfaces really well. The two surfaces I recommend to my students are UArt 320 or 400 and the Pastel Premier Italian clay. And that's, I just did a portrait. I did that on Italian clay. I love the if I want a toned surface that's already toned, I think the Pastel Premier Italian clay is one of the best surfaces out there.
Okay.
I don't like color fix anymore. I don't use color fix. I don't use pastel board because it's too hard.
Yeah.
I do like pastel matte. I think pastel matte is good. I played with Lacarte a couple years ago, which is kind of expensive, but anyway, you know, there's lots of different surfaces out there. Right now, I'm using the Lux Archival because it's expensive. I don't recommend it for beginners, but it doesn't buckle, and it's very thin, and it's got a great backing. And I'm storing all of my paintings in this cabinet in my bedroom. I don't have a lot of space. And when I had the mounted 320 boards, they were on 8-ply mat board. They're really heavy and they take up space. So a lot of this is practicality, you know.
Jean, I don't know if you want to go into this, but your candid sharing of losing representation in a
Yeah.
couple of galleries was eye-opening. And one of the comments was, what do you think are the factors that would cause a gallery to stop representing you? We worry so much about getting representation that losing it is almost never considered.
Well, non-sales, that's it.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
the bottom line.
you know, but I'm still up at this gallery in Maine, and I did sell this summer. But you know, I was in the Peninsula Gallery in Lewis, Delaware, and the guy was so nice. He hated to drop me. He really hated to drop me, but I don't know. And he wanted my city paintings. He really wanted my city
At
paintings.
the
So I bought
beach.
over city paintings, and most people didn't really want to buy city paintings over in Lewis, Delaware, you know. So and then the gallery in I was in the gallery in Frederick, and I was really disappointed. That came through. That was what happened in May when I had the sciatica and I couldn't stand or walk. And they wrote to me and said, "You're out." And that was really hard. That was very, very hard. On the other hand, since all that happened, it's just as easy for me. I don't have to drive around and bring pictures
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
you know. But you know,
I have
it's
a
hard.
question, Jean.
Yeah.
If you're making your own surfaces ready and you're using Art Spectrum or whoever golden ground, would it be possible if the surface works for you for, say, the foliage part of a painting but not the sky, can you use the ground to make different areas? Like, could you sand the sky down a little bit to make?
You know, I tried that once. I was working on 320 Yard, and I was doing a painting of France, and I had a lot of stone at the bottom. And I decided to just put the gel on at the bottom where the stone was going to be. But then it doesn't work. You have to have the same texture throughout your picture. It really doesn't, it didn't work. And I went back and I added it to the sky. So I do have experience having tried. I've tried almost everything,
Yeah.
you know, but I know exactly what you're saying. Now,
You have
you can also put it on with a roller. There's some people that roll it on the surface, you know. A lot of people make their own surfaces for to save money. That's why Susan Ogle was doing it, you know. So it was all about saving money.
Jean, comment on your sharing the sort of stages of life and how you've moved from the studio base and being more on your feet to a hybrid approach now. Deb Cole says, yeah, well, that's kind of a word that came to mind. Deb Cole said, fascinating presentation and very relevant to us as many of us age too. How would you, and then a question, how would you use watercolor paper? And would you put watercolor on first and then pastel over that?
I don't like watercolor paper.
Yeah.
I do not. I thought about using the cold press because it doesn't have a texture to it. I had a student at Montgomery College who was a watercolor artist, and she did all her pastel work on watercolor paper, and it was dreadful. It was just dreadful. It doesn't, I don't think it works.
It needs some surface added to it.
You know, I mean, my mentor, Dwayne Wakeham, worked on the real heavy Arches watercolor paper. That's what he worked on. But he put a gel on top of that, you know. And I bought that and I tried it out, and it wasn't for me. But
here's a one last question. I think then you'll want to move on. How much do you prioritize? You're talking about experimentation now. How much do you prioritize your desire to experiment and grow relative to painting work that you are aware sells better? Or do you?
Well, that's a good question. And because I do feel like I need to sell. On the other hand, I'm not in any place where I'm selling. So, I'm at a place, you'll see by the end of the presentation where I'm at. Okay. But I decided that in 2022 to just step back and forget about selling and to try and experiment. Now, it cost me $5,000 to frame those pictures for that show, for those two shows. And I sold two. and the rest are in my storage unit. So these are all, they're really difficult considerations. You have to think about what you're doing. All right, let's go on to stage 2. There was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember. Anyway, so using photo references and loving the detail. Okay, so 2023. These are my marsh painting series. So we went to New England. I'm from Massachusetts. I'm from Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, right near Cape Cod. I have 2 sisters who are up there, and New England architecture has always been my thing. So we went to New England in June, and it rained almost all of the time, except when we were on Cape Cod. But it was green, and it was really beautiful. And I had been encouraged to apply. I had a very successful show at Strathmore. I sold 9 paintings, and everybody thought that was great. Anyway, so a woman there encouraged me to apply again, get together with a friend or something, come up with a theme, which is not something I really like to have to do. So I decided to focus on marshes and wetlands, a nice environmental theme, what I grew up with. I grew up right on the water. So, that was my thing. So from images of New England, I began working on, I had had enough of that, those hard surfaces. I threw those away. So I began working on the Lux Archival sanded paper, toning it with colored ink. Now, I was doing that again because I wanted to just keep that experimental thing going on there, the idea of not putting on an underpainting right away. But I wasn't too experimental. Anyway, but I worked from a photo on my iPad. I had it up, and I worked slowly and carefully. This is very different. It's very different. I did start with squares, though. I decided to keep with the squares. I thought, well, I can keep some of what I did in 2022, but go to a surface that I like better, okay? So I'm going to show you a couple of these paintings. All right, so this is Nauset Marsh, one of my all-time favorite places in the whole world. We were fortunate. These were the 3 days we were on Cape Cod. We had beautiful weather. And so that was really nice. So I took a lot of pictures of Nauset Marsh. And so in this one, I found the composition interesting. This is the ocean out here. This is a sandbar. This is Nauset Marsh with an inlet. This is the hill that we're standing on. And these are wild roses. Okay, and I really liked this. I thought this was a really unusual composition. And I was really excited about getting into all the detail in these roses. Now, I kind of think they look like hydrangeas, but these are wild roses. They're very different from, tea roses. They don't have these petals. They have the tiny little petals. There was no violet in these. I used violet for the, so I was playing around with color here, but taking my time, working with the photo, particularly for the detail of the roses and the shadowing. So that, the roses in effect were basically grade green, white, they're white roses in shadow. So there were greens in them. They were not very interesting in the photograph. But this is one of the ones I liked from this series. This one is the one that just blew me away. This is the Bantam River in Litchfield, Connecticut. And this is a 20 by 24. I decided 20 by 24 is now the largest size that I work in because it's about as heavy as I can get. I can still pick this up. Okay, I used a bright red orange. Oh, I know what it was I wanted to tell you about moving and giving up my studio. I had the bathtub taken out of my bathroom, and I put the Pastel cabinet that my husband made in my bathroom. I just wanted to share that little fact with you, that I do a lot of work in my bathroom here. Okay, so this is the Bantam River. And it was really beautiful, but I'm going to show you the photo reference for this. of course, I went to violet for the sky and the water. And because violet to me says a rainy day, an overcast day. You can't have blue because then it looks like a, and I really wanted this to be an overcast. It was actually raining when I took this picture. I did make changes to the composition because you'll see the photo. It was kind of, it just didn't have this. What I changed was the lily pads so that they came out here and had this nice flow that leads you up and in here. So I was really conscious of the need to change the composition. But when I got into the painting of it, this was done on bright red orange ink. And I just did a little bit of I did a drawing in pencil. And then I started out, I think, with some hard pastel, just putting in the darks, just giving myself a sense of where the darks were very lightly. And then I just started over here and started working slowly. This is all Terry Ludwig eggplant in here, little pieces of eggplant. And I just loved painting this. I just loved it. And that this was like, okay, this is where I am. This is who I am. Here's another one from this series. This is called Purple Flag because of these little purple flag iris down here. It's also the same place, Litchfield, Connecticut, same area. I like the composition, the horizontal back here, the shape of the water here and here. I had to simplify this. I'm going to show you here are the two reference photos that I worked from, okay? My friend Carol Greenwald, who's in my Wednesday class, is always amazed at what I paint from. She looked at this and she said, I would never, ever think about painting from this picture. But I really liked this chopped off tree and the fact that there was more water than tree. But you saw what I did with that. But you also see the color, gray. I never use pure gray, ever, okay? So those are the reference photos. And if, just go back one, you see that there's a lot more color in this. I put violets back in here and I played with these orange heads and all of that and my little bird. And so, this is kind of my comfort zone, working with a photo that has enough detail, making changes to the composition where it's needed, and playing with the color. Here is a more recent, these are my marsh pictures, more recent one from Chincoteague, where I went in November with my friend Kathy Abramson. We took lots of pictures. It's the only second time I've been there. I was there in May of 2015. This time, I was very disappointed. It was very dry. They've been having a drought. There just wasn't much water. There wasn't much color. But this one had a lot of blue. And I really played with upping the oranges in here and the turquoises. And finally decided, yeah, I think this is a good painting. And I was happy with this. Okay, so what I liked about this approach, I felt more at home. As I said, I was in my comfort zone. I was happy to be using sanded surfaces again. I did a number of cloud paintings. The Lux Archival isn't as toothy as the 320 UART, but it doesn't need mounting and is less expensive and takes up less space in my storage cabinet. I wasn't completely copying the photos, but I did rely on them a lot more, particularly for the detail. But then, my husband said he was really bored with these marshes. I said, I am too. In the fall, we went to the Canaan Valley in West Virginia, and I took pictures, and we went to the Eastern Shore. I took a lot of pictures. I just didn't really feel like doing anything with them. I love New England, but these other places, it's not where my heart was. Okay. All right, so now I do have a demo of working in this style. I created this for my classes last summer. So this is Morning Light Stonington. It's not a marsh picture, but it's done in the same way. This was done for the one gallery I'm in Maine. It's not a marsh picture, but it's painted similarly. So here are the two references. And Mary Ellen was in my studio with me the day I did the drawing of this. Maybe you remember Mary Ellen. So I have two photographs of Stonington, Maine. And if you've ever been to Stonington, Maine, the houses are all on a hill and they go down to the water and they face east. So in the morning, I was there in 2017. That's the last time. This was in the morning. And so they're all getting this lovely sun on them. So I liked this down here, not that building, but I liked this and this bush. But I really liked this progression over here. And I thought this was kind of boring. So here's the drawing that I did. So I did a drawing with that and that. I also changed the trees. You see the trees? I decided to put in fir trees or something, okay? Evergreens. So here is the toned Lux Archival with the drawing on it, okay? So that's how I started. You see the differences in the ink because I put a little water in it to stretch it. And so it was a little bit, not so. Now I could have done an underpainting for this one because I had a drawing, I had a composition. So I could have done an underpainting, but I wasn't in that phase. I was toning, and so I just did it. Okay, and I decided to begin with hard pastels, which is not normally what I do, but I thought, well, why not? Let's try something different. And so, I started with the sky and the trees and the houses, and I'm putting in, of course, those houses, those roofs are all black and gray, and I never used black and gray, so they all became blue and green. And so I'm going to go, this is a pretty quick demo I'm going to show you here. Just going through different stages. This is the water added. And I left a lot of red showing through. Like with this, I just did this just to get in the darks, just to get in. I didn't feel like I needed to know where the greenery was going to be, but I didn't need to have it fully developed in the hard pastel. Just needed to have it there. And there are going to be lupins in front of it. Okay, so here's the soft pastel coming on over the hard pastel in the sky. Here's the trees refined. Okay, this is all still hard pastel. Here I've painted the primary house at the upper left. Then I decided it was too light. The houses are all tilting to the left. Do you notice that? They're all kind of going that way. So I straightened up the houses, added blues to the shadowed side of the house. This was done as a demo for my students last summer. Worked on the lower corner, worked on this down in here. Here I have added the lupins. You see the lupins here. And here is the final painting. And there's still red coming through in places. When you do tone, it's kind of nice to leave some of that red showing through, particularly if you have, the first one I ever toned with that red was the painting of Orkney that I had in the show at the Glenview Mansion. And the colors in it were all muted colors. And so letting little bits of that red show through, that was really nice. And this one's all blue and green. And I thought, well, the red would be kind of nice there. So anyway, I felt pretty good about this painting. It's definitely Stonington, Maine, but you cannot find this exact scene because I made it up, okay, by using two different photographs. So that made me feel more creative. And that's always important. So how do you like this? Okay, it's more traditional, more comfortable, more boring. I don't know. I could have begun with Giraud, which is how I normally start my paintings. But anyway, all right. So questions, comments? If you want to unmute yourselves and ask a question, that's fine. Oh.
Did you use any alcohol? Is one of the questions.
No, there's no alcohol. No, because it's not an underpainting. I only use alcohol for an underpainting. This is using a toned surface, not an underpainting.
She went straight to.
I went straight to the shapes. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Jean, I really like your building paintings. I think
you have such an affinity for the structure and the shadows.
Yeah.
I think those are my favorite of all the works that you've shown.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You'll see where I end up.
So one comment was, I like that you let some of the underpainting peek through.
Good. It's really good if you've got rusty boats, you know.
Mhm.
Anytime you want to have peeling paint or anything, you want to have like either a tone or you want to have some color under there. So that's really nice.
Here's another one. I love the purples and blues, the replacement of the same tones in gray or neutrals with more vibrant colors. The demo was fun.
Good. Thank you.
Virtual demo. See, that's good. We can all see it.
All right. We have another one coming up.
Have you considered just converting your references into grayscale references and allowing that to force you to come up with colors you would enjoy?
I use black and white photos a lot. I have. If any of you, I'm famous for my two pine paintings, turquoise pine and hot pink pine.
Mhm.
If you look at my website. So I don't use, here's the thing about the photograph, okay? I don't print out my photographs anymore because rarely do I copy the photograph exactly as it is, okay? So I tend to just draw. I do a drawing on drawing. I do a half-size drawing first. So that drawing that you saw was a 9x9 for an 18x18. Then I double it, and that's how I work. But I like to be a little freer than actually having the printout with a grid on it and all this kind of stuff. You know, I have done that for city paintings, but when you're not doing a city painting, it's not quite as necessary.
So there are two questions in here.
Mhm.
One is, how do you store your pastels, by color or tone? And another is, how can you keep pastels safe from moisture in a bathroom?
I have a large bathroom, and fortunately, the shower has really good ventilation above it. And I'd never seen any water at all on the windows. You know, when I take a shower and I get out, my mirror has no, you know,
Yeah.
not clouded
No
up or
humidity,
anything.
no moisture.
So I not only have my pastel cabinet in there, I have 3 paintings above it on the wall. But back to, what was the first question?
How do you store, you know,
Okay,
usually
so
when
my
we ask about that,
pastels are stored.
yeah, how do you, it's really more,
How do I
you have them
organize them in
organized?
my boxes? Okay, they are organized first by color. And I start with violet on the left, violet, blue, cool green, green, yellow, orange, red, neutrals. So I have like 8. And I used to have the large Heilman box and I had them in there. Now I have a pastel cart that my husband made for me with 8 slots. I have the Giroux in a separate category above, but the same color. And then I have them, and I have slides of this I could show you because I just put them in my PowerPoints for my classes.
Sounds like a studio tour.
Yeah. So then I go with the lightest color at the top and work down to the dark. Okay, the darks are at the bottom, the lights are at the top. And, you know, after you work for a while, it becomes kind of a mishmash, but I try to keep it that way.
Do you think a drawn value study is a more important reference than the photo reference?
Yes, yes. I mean, I do the drawing, and as you could see in the drawing, you know, I don't color it in, but I use the graphite pencils to work on, you know, to get the values, to figure out the values.
Yeah, so you're getting questions, I think, that may be worthy of another conversation at a later time on how do we decide which of our work to enter in shows, how do we decide to price our work,
Yeah,
how
no,
do we
that's a whole
decide,
other issue. Yeah,
which ones to even offer for sale.
yeah.
So I think these are good comments, and let me just tell
Yeah.
those whose comments we aren't picking up that we save
Yeah,
them
if we
all.
have time at the end, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
We can all talk about that. Okay. All right, let's go on. Now, the third thing is detail and abstraction or simplification. So meanwhile, when we were on Cape Cod, I had a really happy day. My day at Nauset Marsh, I also found out that my painting Grace had been accepted into the PSA show. The PSA, this is the Pastel Society of America. I am a signature member. I'd had one award. Over years, some of my best paintings were in there, and they didn't get awards. The painting that got an award, I threw out if I hated it. Anyway, but this one, I had just decided it was an online show instead of in person, and I wouldn't have to ship it. And at the last minute, I applied. It got in. Then it won an award. I got my second award, one more, and I'm a master pastelist. Then the Butler Museum chose it and other winners to go to Youngstown, Ohio, so I had to ship it. Okay. So this painting, it's one of my favorites. It was done in 2018. And it's a combination of two things: really careful, slow detail and simplification. And this is something I've been interested in recently. And the award made me think, well, maybe this is the direction I should go in. The first thing I'm going to show you is the reference photo. This is another one of those Carol Greenwald photos. Can you imagine being inspired by this photo? This was a walk at Lake Frank in December. There was no light. It was totally overcast. But I just really love this tree. I love this tree. And I thought, wow, look at this. This is really nice. So, and I have to mention, because I know she's here, Joyce Lister has always claimed that the worst photos make the best paintings, okay? This is a very good example of that, because here's the painting. So here I really had to go away from that photo, but I had the detail of the tree. I had the tree. I could use the photo for the detail of the tree, all these lovely branches, the color, the lichen, all this stuff. This was really, really nice. And I had such a good time painting this. I used Blue Earth soft pastels, but I used them very, very lightly. And I put on a lot of layers. And I built up a sense of light here. There really wasn't any light, but there was lighter color. I just love doing this. But then I got to the background. And I have a funny story. I mean, I had a tiny little piece of this schminky blue-gray. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get that whole sky done in this? And I went over to my pastel cabinet. This was done in my studio in Twinbrook. And I opened the drawer and I realized I had bought a whole new stick of it. I was so happy. Because a lot of times I don't replenish supplies and then, I don't have it. So anyway, this is just one color. I took a blue-gray, a grayed violet here, and just made in a big shape, and then just brought in enough of a sense of trees back here, all in the same color as this, to give the sense of there being other trees, but not that forest of, and you notice that the color is different from what was in that photo. And the photo is all brown. Everything's brown. And here I'm using violets. And then I had a really nice time with the bottom and realized I could go to more orangey color here. I could put these little grass heads in here. I decided to add these details of twigs and things. I thought that, so I loved doing this painting. And I thought, this is what I should do. I can be an abstract painter. I can be a detail painter. I can have both things at once in the same painting, okay? That's really nice. But it's hard to find the right subject matter for this, okay? It's hard to find the right subject matter. But I do have a picture from last summer that I just did a painting of, and you might have seen it on Facebook. This second painting in this style was, which I just did, was a struggle. I mean, this one was real struggle, and I have a real demo of this. I'm going to show you. Okay, so this is my painting, State Pier, New Bedford. And I grew up 6 miles from New Bedford. New Bedford is the largest fishing city in the country. And the people there, the fishermen, they're all of Portuguese descent. And they take these boats, these rusty old boats, and they go up to the North Atlantic to go fishing. And I have taken many pictures of these boats over the years, but this was the first time I'd gotten some that I was really excited about. And this was another rainy day, and it stopped raining. So we walked down to the pier, and I got a number of pictures of these boats. So I was really excited about this because, of course, this against this. This over here had lots of potential to have some really nice color in here. And then there's the reflections and all of this stuff. But then there's all this junk up here. And I just call it junk because I don't even know what to call it. I don't know what to call this thing. And there's just all of these things, hooks and just a lot of stuff, okay? So, but for 6 months, I've been thinking about doing this painting. I decided right away, this is my winter series when there's no color outside, and this is what I'm going to do in the winter. I'm going to paint these boats. So in September, I had another problem and ended up on the bed again. And so I spent a lot of time doing this drawing. And I decided that in order to understand the photo, I would draw the whole thing. And I spent a lot of time drawing this. I did a lot more drawing here than I normally do. I put in all the detail, knowing that I wouldn't do that in the painting, but I thought it might help me understand it. And I did this in September, and I didn't do the painting until December. So yeah, I'm not sure how much it helped. But it's a very busy scene. And of course, this is the center of interest right here. And I want these two boats to stand out from everything else going on, okay? And so this was a challenge. So here is my underpainting. So this is done on, I still had a bunch of mounted UArt. I had 18 by 24 mounted UArt boards. I had bought 10 of them sometime. And I thought, well, this is what I'm going to use for these. So this is on 320 UArt. I thought it would have lots of grit and would be nice for layering color. So I'm doing a traditional underpainting. I'm using, green under red and blue under red and orange under green, blue, and that sort of stuff. You notice that I haven't done a lot back in here, just pieces of color. I used the darkest hard pastel I had, which was not dark enough, but here is the underpainting, which I think looks like toy boats, This is not the greatest underpainting in the world. But the main thing is just that I've positioned the two major things. I've got that in there. I have left all of this pretty much vacant because I don't know what I'm going to do, okay? It's not what I'd call an inspiring underpainting, just like that one on the hydrangeas. That wasn't terribly inspiring either. Okay, so here's the upper left quadrant. So I couldn't wait to get to this boat. I just been thinking about that for 6 months. I've been wanting to paint this boat. So I went right into it. And at first I thought this was part of this boat. And I realized, no, this is part of this boat over here. Took me a while to figure that out. But, I really got into all of this. And, I'm calling this thing a tower because I don't know what to call it. I don't know the technical terminology of any of these things. I think this is something that they use for, they have probably big nets and stuff that they drag, and these are pulleys and that sort of thing. So I don't really know what to call these things, but I put this in here. And at this point, I looked at my photo and I realized I had started the whole drawing a little too low, and I had left too much space up here. And I thought, oh, shoot, because this is the part I don't know what to do with. Now, yesterday I started a picture and I drew the whole thing, and I realized I didn't draw it in the right place. So I erased the whole thing and drew it over again. It's worth doing that if you haven't put the pastel down. But when you've got the pastel down and the underpainting, you can't change it at this point. You can't, unless you want to start a new one all over again. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to have to deal with it. Okay. Here is a detailed photo that I took of the background. And you can see I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just putting color in because I don't really know what to do with it. I had put in this this thing here. This has got coils and wire or something, rope maybe. So here's another version. So here, at this point, I put this part in. I really like this part over here because here I knew what was going on. These are pails and this was defined. So this was easy to deal with because it was defined shapes and things. What was back here was not, and I really didn't know what it was. So, I'm playing with this background and I really hate this. You notice that's come out. Okay, so here I have finished this boat and I love doing this. Oh, I just love doing this. I put turquoise in here and orange and, this was a lot of fun. And I made sure that this connected, that these lines connected. So it was obvious that these were one boat back here. I'm still not completely sure. I have other photos of these boats from different angles, but so anyway, so I have toned down this tower thing from that red that it was, because it was taking the attention away from this. I've gotten out my Terry Ludwig eggplant and I'm putting that in for the really, really dark. Okay, I'm using that for the darks. This is all still a mishmash back here. I've painted this guy up here, but so here I've done the water and reflections. And I'm not real happy with the water because these edges are not smooth. And these water reflections, you have to have really, really smooth edges. So I'm not happy with that. I didn't get quite enough of there's not enough color in here from here. But this is getting on to Christmas, and I was kind of depressed. I was disappointed with this painting. I had been looking forward to doing this for 6 months. And I thought, this is a disaster. This is just a disaster. I don't know what to do with it. So I decided to just put it away. I did a couple of other paintings. I made up a little village. That was kind of fun, but not great. And then I took another picture and I made a June picture into a December picture with snow. That was fun. But I was kind of disappointed that I had not been able to master this one. So, of course, I don't quit. I'm not a quitter. I got it back out maybe over New Year's weekend. And the first thing I did was to shorten this guy and get rid of that flag that was coming right into it. I really hated that. I made a even darker. I got out the Terry Ludwig dark set and tried to tone down this so that this orange would stand out against it. I took a very soft turquoise and tried to smooth out these edges, okay? So it did work there. You notice here that I've signed it, that I think I'm done. I send the picture to my husband and my friend Walter, who's here, and say, what do you think? Am I done? Walter says, no, too much blue back here. So I had to agree with him. There was too much blue. I had never resolved the background. I did not like that background. So I said, okay, I'm going to call this State Pier because that's what it said on the cell phone, State Pier, New Bedford. So that was my title. So I thought, okay, well, let's just put a line back here and make it into a pier maybe, and some dark underneath it. And I put some violet, light violet in here. I thought, well, this is good. I like this. But then I looked at it and I thought, there's none of this violet anywhere else. It was just standing out to me. And if I was going to use that violet there, I would have to use it down here. If that's supposed to be the sky and the water is reflecting the sky, I would have to put violet over all of this. I said, no, do that. So I just got out a blue earth. This has got a lot of pastel on it at this point because I never brushed off any of that color that was there. So I got a really soft blue earth, put a light blue in there, and it was like magic because all of a sudden it just neutralized it. And I felt like, okay, now it doesn't bother me because it's blue and it's just a different value. So this is the final picture. I put it on Facebook. I got some of the best comments I've ever gotten on Facebook. People thought, wow, this is really amazing. But this was hard. This was hard. And I think you can see how hard it was. Okay, so what do you think of this approach? Is this
Hey,
something?
you've got some comments here. Let me,
Yeah.
one is it's so comforting to hear your challenges with this painting. I love how you found resolution. The drawings are terrific. Good to hear the problem solving process, including mistakes. You know, it just kind of takes us, well, it strikes home. How do you, wait a minute. There was one about, if I refer back to your tree, Grace, did you do the background first and then the tree, or did you do the tree? You know, how did you work back and did you go back and forth?
You know, that I don't, I did that in 2018. I'm pretty sure I did the tree first.
Yeah, I
The
think so.
background. I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
And do you draw in pencil or charcoal when you were doing these drawings?
It's graphite.
Graphite pencil.
Yeah, all graphite.
So folks like to hear how you solve the problem, including dealing with mistakes and how you worked around that. Very successful resolution to a difficult image. Love the simplification.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's just finish off.
Okay.
More recently, this is my last painting. I decided to paint a lock house on the C&O Canal. I'm having a show with an environmentalist of my canal paintings at Duke University in April. And I thought it would be really nice to have a picture of one of the lock houses. And I took this picture a year and a half ago, and I loved the light on it. It was just great. So I started this painting, and I just really had a good time with color. Down here, I had bright oranges. This is an underpainting. Okay, this is Lux Archival with an underpainting. I had bright magenta down here, okay? And when I got into this wall, and what this is a white building in light and shadow. And I just love painting white buildings in light and shadow. This is my hopper, you know, I'm very much into hopper. Not a great person, but I just love the same things that Hopper loved. So I started out with like greens, but then I got into violet. Of course I got into violet. And that was when I became happy. I became happy. I started out back in here with just some dark blue, but then I put violet and magenta in here. I put some lighter pieces on to give a sense of reflection on the glass. This is a very light orange. This is orange. I played with the color in the steps, all of this. And of course, I said, I'm a colorist, for goodness sakes. That's what I am. I like painting buildings and I like color. Why am I going through all this angst? I should know who I am by now, right? I should know. This gave me so much pleasure. And so I decided, okay, just, do what I love to do. Do not worry about whether it's going to sell or anything. Just do it. And so I have one last slide. What have I learned from all of this examination? Okay. That using photos is okay as long as I'm able to see the possibilities in them and to change the composition, the color, or more. And I teach people, some of my classes focus on photos, using photo references. The photo reference is a beginning. And the first thing I tell people is, what are you going to change? When you look at a photo, the first question you should ask yourself is, what am I going to change? There's always going to be something. That I love detail and trying to make up paintings completely from my imagination is not all that satisfying. It really isn't. But I want my paintings to be expressive and not just about the detail. The details should be the icing on the cake. That I don't need to paint in a series to create a good collection of paintings, and trying to force this doesn't work, like all those marshes. That I should make the most of my color sense and free myself up even more, perhaps. and that I am so fortunate to be a pastel painter. That's it. All right.
Brava.
The end. Okay. Anybody else want to ask a question or make any comments?
Yeah, I think we had quite a number. Denise, did you have one?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting to see the changes of her perspective in, yeah, I'm going to go this way, but all of a sudden there's a shift. I like that because exploring new venues and information helps to change the flow, and we don't get stuck in a routine.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah,
a
and
lot of realizations in there.
challenging yourself is a good thing.
Yeah.
I recently did a portrait. I mean, I did 2 portraits in 2020, myself and my husband, and they were both good. And then recently, a friend here asked me to do a portrait of his wife, and I had said no, no more portraits. Well, I did it, and it was good. It was good. And that kind of challenge is really good for us to show us that we can do things that we don't normally do. We don't always have to be stuck in the same rut of doing the same thing over and over again.
I agree. I also love using different materials and like totally going into acrylic or oil, and then seeing how that changes my palette or my selections in my pastel work. I find that exciting.
I do
Actually.
not use any other media. I only use pastel. I have 5 lifetimes worth of pastels in there in my bathroom. I can't afford to do anything else.
Yeah.
I should say why I work in pastel and not those other media. I'm a disaster at mixing paint. I'm a total disaster. When I tried to mix oils and stuff, they all became brown. Everything became brown, my least favorite color. So I went from colored pencil, which was clean, to pastel. I went to ordained colors. And I don't do oil or acrylic, but so I'm stuck with glass, and heavy paintings. Yeah.
Jean?
Yep.
Here's a comment for you to comment on. Our demo artist this summer said something that stuck with me. This is Patricia. We are here for the challenge. It's the struggle that lets us actually create. Do you agree?
Yes. Yeah, I think that is quite true. If you never challenge yourself, you don't grow and you don't really know who you are. If you become Thomas Kincaid and you keep doing those Thomas Kincaid paintings over and over again, you sell a lot, but nobody respected him as an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else? I do really appreciate having had the opportunity to do this because it did make me think it all out. And I can't tell you how happy I was when I did that last painting. I just felt like, this is me. This is what I do. This is what I like to do. I'm just going to do this, and I've sold pretty well doing that. But I am going to go back to trying out some other handmade surfaces. I'm going to experiment with that. I'm going to look for other photos that I can do simplification with. I'm going to try that.
One correction for Thomas Kincaid's reputation. It was noted here that he did have wonderful art, but it wasn't under his name.
It might be true.
It was very different, totally different from his work.
Yeah.
So I'm saving the chat to share with Jean and the board because there's so many good comments on there, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.